In Magic, control and ownership are different. As with many distinctions in Magic, it can sound like there's not really a difference that makes a difference. But control and ownership have big implications. So in this video, we're going to talk about control, ownership, and the different game implications that happen because of them. Let's dive in. What is the difference between controlling something and owning it? You control a permanent if it's on the battlefield under your authority right now. You choose how it attacks, blocks, and you pay costs or sacrifice it if a spell tells you to. When a card says you on a permanent, it means the controller of that permanent. You own a card if it started the game in your deck. Tokens are owned by the player who created them. Control changes are fairly common, but ownership changes are not. Let's look at some examples where this can matter. Bounce effects often say return target creature to its owner's hand. If you stole my creature with blatant thievery, then unsummon still returns it to my hand because I'm the owner. Dies triggers belong to the player who controlled the creature when it died. If you control magic, my solemn simulacrum and it dies, you draw the card. In a game I played in recently, someone took control of my Galian beast. When it died, we had to double check that it returned to the player who had taken control of it. And it did because they were the controller when its trigger went on the stack, even though it died and went to my graveyard because I owned the card. Where this distinction can become very relevant and raise a lot of questions is when a player leaves the game. When a player leaves the game, three things happen in order. First, everything they own leaves the game. Cards they own disappear. Tokens they own cease to exist. Second, any control-changing effects they created end. So creatures they stole with blatant thievery, or control magic, act of treason, etc., revert to their previous controller, usually the owner. And finally, anything still controlled by that player that they don't own is exiled. This catches permanents they put onto the battlefield under their control with effects like Reanimate, Beacon of Unrest, or Rise of the Dark Realms. There's no ongoing gain control effect to end, so those permanents remain under their control at step 3 and get exiled. Let's consider a situation where I'm playing blue, and I play a blatant thievery, choosing to steal each opponent's commander. Each other player decides that I need to be eliminated so they can have their key pieces back, and I find myself out of the game before my next turn. What happens to the creatures I stole? Going back to what we just discussed, everything I owned would be exiled and cease to exist in the game. Then any control-changing effects I had created in the game come to an end. Think of it like breaking a mind control spell on anything that allowed me to gain control of something in play. Therefore, the commanders I stole go back to their previous controllers. Let's look at a different situation. Suppose I have a haste enabler in play and cast Rise of the Dark Realms. Nobody has a response, and I get all of the creatures in each graveyard. I'm ready to move to combat and pass priority. Player 2 passes, but player 3 plays a Rakdos Charm, and I take lethal damage from this. What happens to all of the creatures? This is where the distinction we've been discussing really makes a difference, and the language is going to get a bit technical. You'll need to listen closely. Unlike blatant thievery, Rise of the Dark Realms does not gain control of something already on the battlefield and under someone else's control. It puts all creature cards from all graveyards onto my battlefield. No control is being changed. So when we go back to our 3-step checklist of things that happen when a player leaves the game, we see that number 2 doesn't apply here. Yes, all creature cards change zones when Rise of the Dark Realms resolved, but cards in graveyards are not controlled by anyone. And that means that there is no control changing effect to end. That leaves us with step 3, which says that if the eliminated player still controls any objects that they don't own, those objects are exiled. This sequence happens immediately when the player leaves. And that's exactly what has happened here. I control all of the creatures I don't own that move to my battlefield as a result of Rise of the Dark Realms resolving, so the game exiles them when I am knocked out. There is a lot of nuance here, but let's try to wrap it up in a way that's easy to understand and identify in your next game. If the text says gain control, you control enchanted, exchange control, or target opponent gains control, then it's a control-changing continuous effect. And if the player who initiated that effect is eliminated from the game, then the permanent goes back to its previous controller. Other effects that say something like put or return a card onto the battlefield under your control do not create a control-changing effect. The object simply enters under your control. On screen are a couple of very common examples of things that make a creature enter under your control. But importantly, no control between players is being exchanged here. If you're eliminated from the game, then the objects you control but don't own will be exiled via step 3 of our checklist. In a sentence, if the card says you gain control, it's a control-changing effect. If it puts something under your control, then it isn't. I know this whole topic sounds niche, but consider that at least 3 players are eliminated in each Commander game. It's much more relevant than you might think. The next time someone's stolen your key engine piece, and you need to figure out if just killing them will help you or not. Hopefully, this video will be helpful. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.